Hello, BookTube, and welcome to Tuesday. That's Tag Tuesday in our little corner of BookTube where we do tags. And there's one tag. There are also a whole bunch of tags that are outstanding and a whole bunch of things that I've seen but I haven't done. But there's one tag that has suddenly exploded. Everybody's doing it. It has gone viral. And that is the spoiler tag. The extraordinary original tag by Gunpowder, Fiction, and Plot. That's all about spoilers. So it's not a tag where you go around your library and pull books off the shelf. It's more a discussion thing, and it has been fascinating to watch. I think I've watched a dozen versions of this tag so far, and I hope there are a dozen more to come. It's been fascinating, and I couldn't resist the urge to weigh in myself. I think I've been tagged by a few people. The one that I saw it on was Roz at Scallydandling About the Books. And Roz at Scallydandling referred to Gunpowder, referred to the originators of this tag as Gunpowder, Treason, Bloody Treason, and Plot. And this is all about what we consider to be spoilers and what we do about them. So I thought I would add to the discussion whatever I can. Question number one is, what do you consider a spoiler? And a note that's cropped up on a number of response videos here is that a spoiler is not just the last minute fifth act plot twist. And that's great. I'm glad that everybody sees that. That's fantastic. A simplistic definition of what a spoiler is won't help anybody. A spoiler is something that the author intends to incorporate an enjoyable element into the work that's cumulative or foreshadowed, so that but that is an element that you are to enjoy, and that knowing about that element will decrease or remove that enjoyment. It doesn't have to be just, somebody jumping out from behind a tapestry. It can be anything. It can be that a character is slowly revealed throughout the course of the book to be dead, or to be a different character. That sort of thing. Where it can happen over hundreds of pages. It's still a spoiler. If you are going to drastically decrease a reader's appreciation, their enjoyment of the work that the author intended them to have, by just announcing it ahead of time. So a spoiler is anything that might ruin the reading experience within reason, and we're going to get to within reason. Question number two is, does the genre you're reading impact what you consider to be a spoiler? I wish that this spoiler tag had come with a spoiler warning for the use of impact as a verb. It did not, so I am triggered. but one or another, I think the answer that the question is going for here is certainly yes, right? Because certain kinds of plot-driven genre stories will place a lot of emphasis on things that are spoilers. They'll place a lot of emphasis on surprising the reader. I myself think that most of the examples of even genre fiction that do that aren't very good. They aren't very much worth protecting. But nevertheless, every book is somebody's first book. So yeah, I think it definitely matters. Mark Nash, I believe, in his response to this video, pointed out that nowadays in literary fiction, in contemporary fiction, endings are so terrible that there'd be no point in spoiling them. There's no way to do it. And that's true in a lot of other kinds of writing as well. So yeah, the kind of writing tends to matter. Number three is, all the best bits are in the trailer. Or in the case of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the best bits are in the trailer, but they aren't in the movie. Because Marvel, for its cinematic universe, pioneered and then perfected the art of lying in a trailer. Simply lying in a trailer. Of filming scenes, interactions, moments that are not in the movie. Fans were so ecstatic with the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe that they didn't really call the studio on that, and they should have, because that's horrible. That's just horrible. All the best bits are in the trailer. Sometimes the synopsis can be too detailed. Do you research books prior to reading them, or do you go in blind? And Roz at Scallydandling said that in her opinion, it's largely the best practice is to just skip the introduction to any canonical work. Even if you think you might need the orientation, just skip it. And Brian at Bookish said, yeah, he just goes in without the introduction, and if that hampers his reading, if the introduction might have actually clued him in to some things that he needed to know, he'll just read the book again, rather than have the first impression spoiled. He points out that he wants to do the interpreting and the understanding of the book in his own way, It doesn't want that prejudice by having read the writer of the introduction's interpretation ahead of time. And I totally agree with that. It is a very, very good habit to get into if you can, when you pick up a Bantam Classic or a Signet Classic or a Penguin Classic or Oxford World Classics where there's a nice, long, meaty introduction. It's a very good habit to get into, to wait to read that until you're done with the book. Read the book first, and then read the introduction right away. That way, your opinions will already be in place, and the author of the introduction will just be helping you. And I've noticed that in modern reprints, even in Penguin Classics, a lot of times those introductions will now come with a warning, almost a spoiler warning, saying there are elements of this introduction that could be seen as spoiling the narrative, and that if you're interested in that, if you care about that, save the introduction until after you've read the book. It's a wise policy, whether the Penguin tells you to or not. Number 4, sometimes the introduction or translator's notes can spoil the ending, especially for classics. Has this ever happened to you? It has not ever happened to me, but the main reason that it's never happened to me, and the main angle that I'm coming at this whole tag from, is that I don't care at all about spoilers. Not whatsoever. Not at all. Not even in genre fiction. Not in the slightest. I don't care in the slightest. About books or even movies. I've lost count of how many times I've had roommates or friends come back from the movies, from something that they'd just seen, and I'm asking them all sorts of questions about it, and one of my routine questions is, how does it end? And they don't want to tell me, even though they know perfectly well that I don't care. I don't care at all. And the reason for that, I think, is bookish. I think the origin of that is bookish, not Brian at bookish. But from books. I was introduced, I came to reading late, and I came to reading through the classics of ancient Greece. And the classics of ancient Greece, Homer, but especially the tragedians, as Tilly points out in her version of this tag, they are absolutely built on what we would consider spoilers. They're built on that. The works of Sophocles and Euripides and Aeschylus depend on the audience knowing how the story ends. The whole shiver of excitement is going to be playing the audience's knowledge of the story against your version of it. So you have to know all the spoiler plot points. You absolutely do. And I entered the world of reading through that doorway. So I do not care at all about the twists and turns or the tricks that some artist or writer has up their sleeve. I don't care at all. I care only about how it's done. And if somebody wants to tell me, the big trick ending, I'm perfectly happy to hear it. It's not going to affect my reading one way or another. So I myself don't take my own advice. I read the introductions to canonical works ahead of time anyway, because I don't care. Even if it's a canonical work that I don't know, I'm not risking anything by learning, the big twist at the end, that sort of thing. Number 5 is name a time somebody spoiled a novel for you. It's never happened. Couldn't happen. It absolutely couldn't happen. The tensest, most popular, word of mouth murder mystery thriller of the season, where all I know is that everybody's talking about the big twist ending. Someone could walk up to me and tell me what that ending was. I would still read the book. I would still either enjoy it or not, depending on entirely on other things, and not on the knowledge of some twist that the author put in the storyline. So no one's ever spoiled a novel for me, and no one ever could. Question number 6 is, have you ever spoiled a novel for somebody else? And for me, that hits directly home, because for those of you who are new to this channel, my job is as a book reviewer. That's what I do for a living. And you are ingrained early on, not only not to spoil the tricks or the ending of a book, but also you're taught, if you know your job at all, you're taught the million ways you can avoid that. There's a million ways that you can do a full and fulsome assessment of a book without revealing any of its twists and turns, without revealing any of the tricks that the reader might get a sense the reader might want you to leave unrevealed. It's easy to review a book that way in most cases. In most cases it is. It's kind of difficult, for instance, to talk about Anthony Trollope's novel Orley Farm, because there is a plot question in Orley Farm that hangs over the first half of the book. And Trollope obviously had as little patience with it as anybody else. He was certainly a master of the last-minute switcheroo, of a trick ending that could spoil the book if you told it to somebody and they cared about such things. But in Orley Farm, he gets tired of the whole suspense of the thing and has the character simply admit it outright in the middle of the book. In a case like that, the reader is still going to feel that suspense for the first half, and you don't want to destroy that. You don't want to hurt that at all. But there are a million ways around it, usually. Spoilers are on my mind lately because of a novel that just came out in February called The Delivery by Peter Mendelsohn. I mentioned it on this channel a couple of times, and I have since reviewed it. It's the story of a delivery boy, an unnamed delivery boy in a big city who's out on his errands and, meeting his customers and making his deliveries and coming back to the warehouse where he lives, where his dispatcher sends him out on his rides. And about at the halfway point, a plot starts to develop. He starts to become romantically attracted to his female dispatcher and wants to buy her a present. And, of course, that's frowned upon by his horrible supervisor who doesn't want him skimming any money for himself. And all of that is interesting. All of that is really well done. It is a really well-executed novel until the last 10 pages. In the last 10 pages, a thing is revealed that ruins the novel. And I can't talk about it. I absolutely can't talk about it because it is absolutely a spoiler. Mendelsohn is working your tension. He is working your attention to fixate on what the answer to this thing at the very end of the book is going to be. No conscientious book reviewer could possibly bring it up, even for the urgent need to talk about it. It's just not ethical. It just isn't right to do. So I can't. I haven't been able to do that. I'm not able to do that except in private with a couple of people who either don't care or who've already read it. The ending completely ruins the experience of the book. Simple as that. And you might think that's not possible. You might think, well, if the early parts were enjoyable, then how can it be ruined? Somewhere down the line, when the book has gone out of print and no one cares about it anymore and every one of you has read it, then maybe we can talk about it. But it's been on my mind because that was one of the few examples that I've encountered in decades of writing book reviews where the question of a spoiler was actually on my mind. You give me anything else, virtually anything else, the most tense and intricately plotted police procedural novel that has a twist 30 pages from the end and then a mega twist at 5 pages from the end. You give me a book like that, I can do it perfect justice without even mentioning those things. It's easy to do. It's easy usually to avoid spoilers. And it was easy to avoid spoilers with The Delivery, but I had to mention in the review that that's what I was doing. Usually I don't need to do that, but with this book and with a handful of others, but I've never seen an example worse than this. I have no idea what the author was thinking. And he must have been writing the book without any support system in place from anyone else, including an editor at his publishing house. It has to be that no one with a brain in their head read the last 10 pages of this book, or, horribly, it could be that the people who read it are young or are thoroughly inculcated into the 21st century participation trophy mind frame where nothing is wrong, where nothing is bad, where nothing is inept, and where you can't call anything that or you'll be sued. It could be that those were the support systems that he had. One way or another, that brought the subject of spoilers to my mind, but usually it's easy to avoid. I don't even give it a thought anymore. In fact, it's so instinctive for me that I very often will just do that when I'm talking about a book to you on this channel, where it's not an official book review at all. I will, if I bring up a book and I know there's some plot point, even if it's a minor one, that I think you might get a thrill out of discovering on your own, I just automatically avoid it. I automatically avoid even bringing it up. Just mention it. That's all. Just gesture in that direction. But I draw the line when it comes to this sort of thing at canonical classics. Okay? I know every book is some reader's first book. I know that everybody's encountering even canonical classics for the first time. But some things have entered into the culture. And if a thing has entered into the culture, I'm not really going to care whether or not I talk about it. I'm going to assume that either you already know it or you're tardy in learning about it. I'm not going to pussyfoot around it because you're wondering whether or not Romeo and Juliet get married and have kids together. I'm not going to pussyfoot around the given of the book. You know, I'm not, if I'm writing about Hamlet, I'm not going to be concerned with the small group of people who are wondering, so does the Hamlet and this Ophelia chick get together? Or well, gee, I wonder if Troy makes it out okay. Does Troy fall? Who wins, the Trojans or the Greeks? I'm not really going to care about such things. I know that seems heartless, but I am most certainly not, under any circumstances, and I have been asked to do this and simply refused. I will most certainly not add some sort of spoiler warning for Beowulf. I will not do that. Absolutely. Past a certain point, when it's part of the culture, then you proceed at your own risk, as far as I'm concerned. Anything other than that, and no. But but worrying whether or not I'm going to ruin Oedipus Rex for you, I'm not going to go that far. Prompt number 7 is, if spoilers ruin novels, are there some authors and genres you can't reread? I don't think that they do. If the book is any good, then even a spoiler that's done directly to you won't ruin the book. I'm much more along the lines of what Roz said. She said that when she rereads a book that had spoilers that she didn't know about the first time, she's hunting for the spoilers the second time just to recover the thrill. And I agree with that. That's much closer to my own experience. Now, like for instance, the stereotypical place to go here with this prompt would be murder mysteries, where you're reading a disposable, $1 paperback murder mystery, and the clues are building up, and there's a second murder, and then all is revealed. And you might think, the natural reading of this prompt would be, well, you can't read that book again. And I would say it all has to do with the skill of the execution. Not the execution of the victim, but the execution of the book. If it is just a disposable, completely plot-driven, one-dimensional paperback mystery novel that the writer hasn't put a whole lot of time or effort into, just a way for you to beguile an idle hour, then fine. Then you can't read it again. Because if you happen to remember it, when you embark on it, you're going to know how it ends, and that's the only reason. That'd be the only real payoff of the whole thing. But a really good murder mystery? I don't know how many times I've read Dorothy Sayers, Peter Wimsey stuff. I don't know how many times I've done that. P.D. James, an author I just mentioned in a video today. Her novels improve with rereading. That far from making it less because you know how they come out, they improve that way. Same thing with Elizabeth George. No. Most of the time, if the book is good, then I want to reread it anyway, whether I know the spoilers or not. Prompt number 8 is, when reviewing, are you spoiler free? Does this limit your ability to discuss? Well, I was talking about this just a minute ago. It doesn't usually limit your ability to discuss. I am completely spoiler free. Any conscientious book reviewer should be completely spoiler free. And with none of this business of, well, who knows what counts as a spoiler, and none of that. We're all adults here. It's perfectly obvious to know what counts as a spoiler and what doesn't. Saying that a character who's living in Tokyo at the beginning of a novel later moves to Osaka, it's not a spoiler. That's just a plot development. The reader of that story is not going to say, oh, and he's not going to care. And a reader who says, hey, you spoiled that, you shouldn't have included that, should be told to sit down and shut up. Now, you can't do that in the 21st century because those readers don't say it to you. They don't say it to the reviewer. They say it to the editor. And they want you fired. And they want you blacklisted so that you never publish any review anywhere else again. And they kind of like you not to work in any other field either. And if people point out, well, if the reviewer that you're trying to destroy can't work anywhere, then they can't earn money for food. And without food, they'll starve. And the person who's pretending to be offended will just sit back, kind of bland smile on their face. Yeah, they're not telling them anything they don't already know. The 21st century has weaponized disappointment into lawsuits. Nevertheless, I don't care about narrating the plot. And it's very easy to tell. In almost all cases, it's very easy to tell what's going to count as a spoiler. Maybe it's extra easy because I've been doing it for so long, but I don't hesitate at all. I don't have any fraction of a second of hesitation when I happen to be, on the rare occasion I'm reviewing, for instance, a new work of fiction. I don't have a second's hesitation in knowing what I can and cannot include in the review. And it certainly doesn't limit. Certainly not. For two reasons. One, a book where the critical assessment of it is severely limited by one plot twist isn't worth the critical assessment in the first place. You shouldn't be reviewing such a book. It's going to sell on its own or not, but it doesn't need analysis. It doesn't need you to write about it if that's all it's got going for it. And two, like I mentioned, if the book is well done, then you'll have plenty of stuff to talk about. If the book is poorly done, but in an interesting way, you'll still have plenty of stuff to talk about. You don't have to mention spoilers. They don't have to come up at all. Some reviewers just feel compelled to sort of circle very obviously and very awkwardly around the spoiler. And they do it, I think, for personal rather than professional reasons. They do it because it's neat to be in the know. It's neat that they know something that they know the reader doesn't know yet. And you so much want to say it. You so much want to give it away. It's a very adolescent thing. Reminds me of a very famous example of the potential for spoiling a work of art, in this case a movie. The great movie of Murder on the Orient Express. Not the Kenneth Branagh desecration of it from a few years ago, but the great one with Albert Finney as Hercule Poirot. That movie, when it came out 50 years ago, 60 years ago, was a hit. And it drew crowds on a Saturday night. There was no internet. There were only 3 TV channels. And people there'd be a line outside the movie theater in, say, small town Iowa. And it was the easiest temptation in the world to drive by one of those lines and just yell out the spoiler for Murder on the Orient Express. Murder on the Orient Express can be spoiled in one quick sentence. Just 4 words. We'll spoil the whole thing if you don't know it, if you don't know how the story goes. Now, that was a kind of mean and adolescent thing to do. Of course, when your choices are between that or cow tipping, but one way or another, even there, you wouldn't want to do that. Of course, you wouldn't want to do that. And the times when that was done, the crowds were not happy. But even there would kind of illustrate my point, because that is a great movie with an incredible cast of characters having the time of their lives, just doing a great job from start to finish. So even if you do know the ending, I've lost count of how many times I've rewatched that movie when I already know the key, crucial, epic spoiler at the end of it. So avoiding spoilers doesn't limit your ability to discuss a thing, mainly because the books where it would aren't worth discussing, in my opinion. And then prompt number 9 is going to be a problem. Prompt number 9 is shout out. Tell us about 5 channels you enjoy and then tag them. And the reason that's going to be a problem is because almost a huge number of people have done this, and a huge number of people are doing it even as I speak for Tag Tuesday. So I don't know who's already been tagged, who's doing this. I don't want to multiple tag people. I want to just punt and tag you all just indiscriminately. If you haven't done this, I want to hear your thoughts on spoilers arranged around these prompts: from Gunpowder, treason, bloody treason, and plot. I want to hear your thoughts about spoilers and how important or not they are to you. So if you're watching this and you have a BookTube channel, feel free to do this tag. And if you're watching this and you don't have a BookTube channel, isn't it about time you joined the fun? You certainly have a piece of technology somewhere within arm's reach where you're sitting right now that can record and upload a video. So why don't you do that? Here's a good thing. So I'm going to wrap this up. That was my tag for Tag Tuesday. And I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.